After I caught the flu, my in-laws came over to help with the kids. I woke up to find my mother-in-law wearing my robe, cooking in my kitchen, and telling my daughter, "This is what a real mother does." My husband said, "She's just old-fashioned." I waited until I could stand again. Then I donated every dish she used and changed the locks while they slept. I got the flu bad this past winter. I mean the kind that knocks you flat, where you sweat through your clothes and your bones ache. I could barely lift my head. I'm a mom of two girls. Abby is 7, Molly is 4, and I usually handle everything at home while my husband, Mark, works. But when I got sick, I couldn't even take care of myself. The first 2 days, Mark tried. Sort of. He made frozen waffles for the girls, put on cartoons, brought me Tylenol when I asked. But he looked overwhelmed, like he was the one suffering. On day 3, he told me his parents were coming to help. My heart sank. Let me explain. His mom, Barbara, doesn't help. She invades. She criticizes. She acts like this house is hers the second she walks in. I've tolerated her for years because she lives out of state and only visits a few times a year. But now she was flying in to save the day. They showed up that afternoon. Barbara walked in with a forced smile, Rick right behind her dragging a suitcase like they were moving in. She gave me a look like I was faking it, like I was lazy. "Poor thing," she said as she peered into my bedroom. "Don't worry, we'll take care of everything." Mark acted like he'd done something heroic by calling them. I barely slept that night. I heard her opening cabinets, moving things around, even clanking my pans together like she was trying to wake the dead. My fever was 102. I couldn't get up, so I just lay there and listened to her take over. The next morning, I got up around 6 a.m. I was drenched in sweat. I needed water. I shuffled to the kitchen in socks and an old shirt. That's when I saw it. Barbara. In my robe. The one my kids gave me for Mother's Day 2 years ago. She was standing at the stove, flipping pancakes, like this was her home. She wasn't just wearing my robe. She had her hair wrapped in my towel, too. My daughter Abby was sitting at the counter, and Barbara leaned over and said, "See, sweetie? This is what a real mother does." I stopped breathing. I stood there in the hallway, my hand gripping the wall because I was still too weak to stand straight. And I just watched her erase me from my own life. When she finally turned and saw me, she had the nerve to smile. "You should be resting, dear," she said, like I was the intruder. I couldn't even answer. I went back to bed. I curled up and cried. Mark came in later, and I told him what she said. He laughed. "She's just old-fashioned. She's trying to help." I stared at him. She wore my robe. "She told Abby she's a real mom." "She didn't mean it like that," he said, like that made it okay. "You're sick. You're reading into everything." I didn't argue. I knew it wouldn't matter. Mark always defends her. Always. So I went quiet. I spent the next 2 days in silence, getting stronger. I drank water. Took my meds. Slept when I could. I let her play queen of my castle. But inside, I was making a plan. By day 5, I could stand without falling. I waited until they were all asleep. Mark on the couch, Barbara and Rick in the guest room, the girls safe in their beds. I walked into the kitchen and stared at every dish, mug, and pan she touched. And I boxed them. Every last one. I drove them to the donation center that night and left them there. Then I went to the hardware store at 7 a.m. the next morning, bought new locks, and installed them. When Barbara went out later for her morning walk, she couldn't get back in. She knocked. Then she banged. I opened the door just a crack. "I changed the locks," I said. She blinked. "Why would you do that?" "Because this is my house," I said. "Not yours." "Not anymore." Rick came over, confused. Mark woke up and ran outside, barefoot. "What the hell are you doing?" he yelled. I looked him in the eyes and said, "You let her humiliate me. In my home. While I was sick and helpless. You didn't protect me. So I had to protect myself." He just stood there, speechless. I handed Barbara a bag with her things. The robe, the towel, nothing else. I think it's time for you to go, I said. They went to a hotel. Mark didn't come home that night. He came back the next day, angry. You embarrassed them. I said, they embarrassed me. He didn't say much after that. Just stormed into the garage. I didn't care. I finally had my house back. But that wasn't the end. That was just the start. Because once Mark saw I wasn't backing down, he started changing too. And not in a good way. After that, things changed fast. Mark came back inside that night like a stranger. He barely looked at me. Just grabbed a beer, turned on the TV, and sat there like everything was fine. Like his parents hadn't just been kicked out for crossing every line possible. He didn't sleep in our bed. Slept on the couch 3 nights in a row. I didn't ask why. I didn't want him there if he was going to sulk and treat me like I was the problem. But the worst part wasn't the silence. It was the way he started acting with the girls. Suddenly, he was overly involved. Picking Abby up from school without telling me. Giving Molly candy before dinner. Trying to be the fun parent. And then he started making comments to them that made my stomach turn. One night, I heard him whisper to Abby while tucking her in, "Don't worry, Grandma will be back soon." Some people just overreact. I froze in the hallway. That was the night I took his phone while he was asleep. He had it password protected, but Mark isn't exactly creative. I guessed it on the 3rd try, our wedding anniversary. I wish I hadn't. There were texts with Barbara. Long ones. Screenshots of my social media posts. Even photos of the kitchen she took while I was sick, captioned with things like, "I had to deep clean everything. It was disgusting, and no wonder she's sick all the time. Look at this mess." He never defended me. He never once said, "Don't talk about my wife like that." Instead, he replied, "I know. I'll handle it when she calms down." When I confronted him the next morning, he didn't deny it. "She's my mother, Kate," he said, like that was supposed to excuse everything. I told him flat out, "If you ever share my private photos or conversations with her again, we're done." I mean it. He laughed. "What are you gonna do? Throw me out like you did them?" I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "If I have to." That's when the mask slipped. He stood up fast. Got in my face. "You think this house is yours? You think you're the only one who matters here?" I didn't flinch. I said, "No, I think I'm the only one who acts like it." That shook him. He backed off. Stormed out. Didn't come home that night. But what happened next wasn't something I could have predicted. 2 days later, a CPS worker showed up at our door. Someone had filed a report. Said the house was unsanitary, that the children were left unsupervised, and that I had violent outbursts in front of them. They wouldn't tell me who filed it. But I knew. Barbara. I sat on the couch that night, hugging Molly tight, shaking with anger. I told Mark what happened. He looked surprised. "She wouldn't do that." "You don't know your mother as well as you think," I said. And right then, I decided something. If they wanted to destroy me quietly, I'd fight back loudly. I wasn't done. I was just getting started. The CPS visit rattled me, but I held it together. I showed them the girls' rooms, the kitchen, the school schedules, everything. I answered their questions calmly. They left saying everything looked fine, but they'd follow up. That was the first real crack in my piece. After that, I couldn't sleep. I started checking the windows, locking the doors twice. I didn't feel safe, not from strangers, but from the people closest to me. I installed cameras. Quiet ones. One in the living room, one at the front door, one above the kitchen. I didn't tell Mark. I needed proof. Of something, anything. I just felt it in my gut. Something worse was coming. And I was right. 2 weeks later, I picked up Abby from school, and she was quiet in the back seat. Usually she tells me everything, who she sat next to at lunch, what song they sang in music class. But that day she just stared out the window. At dinner I asked, "Everything okay at school?" She nodded. Then looked at her dad. That night, After Mark went to bed, she came into my room and sat next to me. "Daddy said not to tell you," she whispered. My heart stopped. I turned off the TV. "Tell me what?" She looked down. "Grandma came to school last week. She said she was picking me up, but then Daddy showed up and said it was a surprise." I wasn't supposed to say anything. I stared at her. "What did she say to you?" She fidgeted. "She asked if you still sleep a lot, if you yell at Daddy, if you ever leave us alone." My blood ran cold. The next morning, I called the school, asked if anyone had changed the pickup list. The secretary said, "Oh yes, your husband added your mother-in-law 2 weeks ago," without telling me. I drove straight to the lawyer's office. It wasn't just a consult anymore. I was filing. I asked about custody, about protecting the kids, about getting the house. But the lawyer asked me one thing I hadn't thought of yet. "Do you have proof of her manipulation?" That's when I remembered the cameras. That night, I went through the footage. It was days and days of boring home life, until I found it. A clip from a few nights earlier. Barbara had come in while I was asleep. Mark let her in through the garage. She went into the kitchen, opened drawers, took pictures. Then she walked into the living room where the kids were watching a movie and said, "Don't worry. Grandma's working on fixing things." She turned to the camera, didn't even realize it was there, and whispered to Mark, "One more visit from CPS, and she'll be out of the picture." Mark nodded. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I downloaded every video clip, every screenshot, every text message he'd sent her. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I was going to burn the whole thing down. I met with my lawyer the next day and showed her everything, every video, every screenshot, every piece of it. She didn't say much, just nodded and started writing. "Do you want to fight for full custody?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Do you want to stay in the house?" "Yes." "And do you want to file a restraining order against your mother-in-law?" "Absolutely." It all moved fast after that. Once the court saw the footage, Barbara creeping in at night, whispering about one more CPS visit, Mark standing by, they didn't need much convincing. We filed for an emergency protective order and full custody based on manipulation and emotional harm to the children. Mark was served the papers while I was at home, playing with the girls in the yard. He pulled into the driveway, pale, holding the envelope in both hands. I watched from the swing set. He didn't speak, just sat on the front steps with his head down. I walked over. "I told you I'd protect them." He looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't look angry. He looked scared. "Are you going to ruin my life?" he asked. I crouched down so we were eye level. "No," I said. "You did that all on your own." The court granted everything. Full custody to me, supervised visits for Mark, and a no-contact order against Barbara. The school removed her from the pickup list. I changed my number. I replaced the locks again, and had a friend move in for a while just to feel safe. Mark moved into a one-bedroom apartment 2 towns over. I didn't care where he went, only that he stayed away. Barbara tried to fight the restraining order. Showed up in court with a fake smile and a speech about how she only ever wanted to help. My lawyer played the video of her whispering about getting me removed. She didn't say another word. She was banned from seeing the kids. For good. But here's where I'll admit my own mistake. I didn't tell the girls everything. I didn't want them to hate their father or their grandmother. I thought maybe they'd just forget, move on. But kids remember. One night, 6 months later, Abby asked, "Why doesn't Daddy live here anymore?" I told her the truth. That he made some bad choices. That he didn't keep us safe. She nodded slowly. "Did you?" That hit hard. Because the truth was, I hadn't kept them safe at first either. I let things slide. I stayed quiet. I let Barbara take over. I thought I was being patient, but I was just afraid to speak up. I held Abby's hand and said no. I didn't. But I'm trying now. And I am. Our home is quiet now. Not perfect. Not always happy. But it's ours again. The girls laugh without looking over their shoulder. I cook in my own kitchen, wear my own robe, sleep through the night. Sometimes at night, I sit in the living room and remember the sound of Barbara banging on the locked door. The look on Mark's face when he realized I wasn't afraid anymore. And I smile, because no one will ever erase me from my life again. Not without a fight.